It's so good to have you back, darling. And New York's a far, far better place now that you've come home. It's so good, yeah. And Josh is a constant and everything like that. And in the audience, welcome very, very much to Conversation. Pleasure to welcome two members of Manhattan Cable's Own, and that being two dear friends of mine. And on my immediate left is Joshua Volinski. And Joshua Volinski was introduced to me as maybe the most effective networker that you'll ever meet. You got to meet the guy, by Paula Gloria some years ago, and I thank her enormously forever for doing that, because it is true. He's the most amazing networker. I think there's nobody in the Upper West Side of New York City that does not know Josh Volinski, yes. And he's a brilliant fellow, and he's honest to the core, and he's got many, many interesting things that he's involved with and has been. And Josh, welcome so much to the program.
I'm so happy to be here with you and Paula, and I want to just give a minute of condolences to the Schmier family. Karen Schmier, this brilliant filmmaker, who was one of the top film editors in our country. Perhaps you saw the film The Fog of War?
Sure.
She did it.
No fool.
She was, so a few days ago she was shopping on Amsterdam Avenue, and some bandits who were escaping from the police hit her, pushed her against the wall, and she was killed.
How horrible.
And there have been memorials for her in Utah, where she won awards. She was only 39 years old.
Oh, my Lord.
The other film she did was Sergio, which was the story of the High Commissioner of Human Rights who was killed in Baghdad.
Yes, I remember.
Sergio D'Amelio. And she did that film too. And she was working on a third film. So we're all waiting to see when the next big memorial for her will be in New York City. And our condolences to the family of Karen Schmier.
Thank you very much for that. I'm so sorry. 39 it's really sad. I'm sorry for such a life. Do you know what the film she was working on was about?
It was I was so overtaken by what I read in the newspaper that I just don't recall, but it was extremely important film.
It might be good for
one that should be made.
Exactly, that's the point. Maybe we should pick up where the baton fell to the ground, pick up and carry it forth and have it reviewed. Yeah, I mean, just take, lessons from the people like that and try to fulfill their dream. Sorry about that again. I don't know them, but consolation to the family. Yeah.
Well,
okay,
the newspaper said she was a nomad. She lived in many places in the world. She was the kind of woman that our dear friend Paula Gloria is, who gets around.
Yeah, you're right.
She's lived in Africa, she lived in India, she lived in California. So, and they've got to write a little book about her.
Yeah, right. Well, that would be a good thing for us to do. And you're right, a good segue to our other guest is Paula. Good to see you. Welcome. It's been a dearth of inspiration with your being away in California. I'm glad you had a good visit with your family, and welcome home.
Thank you, Harold. It's always nice to be back at Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
Yes, always good. And do you think
it really is like a neighborhood?
Do you think it's
a neighborhood of the airwaves, and in this community, and people have been coming up to me on the street. I'm only a block away from Jane Goldberg's day spot on East.
Gramercy Park.
It's 41 East 20th Street, and then when it runs along the park, it's called Gramercy Park South. So she's like 1 block away, and I was crossing the street, and someone came up and just thanked me for my show. And I always ask them, which ones do you like? Because I sort of have this range of politics and spirituality, which was kind of a hurdle when I first started. But it was the 9/11 Truth Movement that sort of made me feel, well, why isn't Amy Goodman doing this? And then it took me 3 years to sort of realize there was a lot of misinformation in it. But just by working with producers here, you can kind of work that out, and it's an ongoing process. But whoever you can actually roll up your sleeves and create something with, I think that's your neighborhood, and that's who you're going to learn from.
That's interesting. That really is interesting. It is unique, public access. I'm going to give a little hint. The ACAP, Association of Cable Access, we're going to be addressed on the 22nd of February by T.C. Louie. And T.C. Louie is one of those pioneers of public access, or of the whole multimedia. Because there used to be a little 8mm film that a person could make back in the 50s and that. But the multimedia revolution is now revolutionizing the entire world. Was attendant upon a whole range of technological innovations that were introduced into the capability. He's got a place down on Murray Street that he has sub-basement and basement, and he's got virtually examples of all of the technology going back to the early 60s, coming out of film and so forth, of multimedia production and distribution, and he's going to be addressing us. And he's a pioneer. He knew all the pioneers of cable television.
Right.
And of public access cable television. And so that's part of the community.
No, I know what you mean about that old technology, because yesterday I was at the hummus place in the East Village with Alan Steinfeld.
Oh, he's back?
Yeah.
Alan went away.
He was in Israel.
Yeah,
and
right.
by the way, he got a great interview. I haven't heard it yet because it's on someone's hard drive back in Israel.
Right.
With the man who discovered THC, the psychoactive ingredient
No
in
kidding.
marijuana, in 1964.
64.
Yeah, in
Okay.
Israel they're allowed to study it. In this country, if you have a study, you've designed a research study, and the endpoint is positive, they won't give any funding because it's under the Department of Substance Abuse, and they will only fund things that will constantly prove it's abusive. And since there's so many benefits to it, I think if they just let one study be done, the cat starts to get out of the bag, as it did in 1974 at the University of Virginia, where it was shown that the THC was exclusively destroying cancer cells
That's
and
really
leaving
amazing.
all the other cells behind. And from that point on, you never heard about it, and you can't get money. But in Israel, thanks to Dr. Mishalom, he's kind of like grandfathered in. In 64, see, this is 10 years before the University of Virginia study, he discovered it. And now Mirinol, that's what that is. You're getting the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, but it doesn't have all of the benefits that you do when you've got the whole plant. So they can't hardly shut him out. So he can keep researching it. 10 years later, he came up with anandamides, I think, another aspect of the plant that is not psychoactive, but it has anti-inflammatory benefits. And as you get older, if you haven't smoked pot for a while, it can make you paranoid. I can't, dysphoria, I think is what they call it. The heart will pound, and you know, it's not good. But also because the strains have been so THC positive. But these other elements in the plant could be very helpful to alleviate stroke and things.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know you've got that. We want to go into it in depth because you've been doing that. I think you did an interview out in California when you were out visiting with your family with people that are involved in the curative capabilities of the cannabis.
Actually, it wasn't actually curative, but I just want to quickly say.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So we're in the hummus place, and a high school friend of Alan's comes up, and he's got a Leica camera. And my dad had a Leica camera.
Yeah.
He got it in the 1940s.
Right.
And this camera's now worth $5,000.
And
this guy's archival photographer, and he only does, you know, not digital photography, you know, when you have to develop it in the film. So he took our picture with a flash bulb that pops once, and then you can't use it again.
No, like out of the old days,
I've never had such a photograph done, so I can appreciate your story.
Have you seen it?
He hasn't developed it. It's
Oh,
not
well,
instant,
you have to develop,
right?
you have to send it off to the lab,
Yeah, so I appreciate,
Nowadays,
so I appreciate your story about this man who's got a whole
Yeah, he's
buildings
wonderful.
full
He
of
should
this
be.
technology.
He goes on. He's got virtually everything, and it goes on. It must be, I don't know, 40,000 square feet or something with sub-basement, and it's all the equipment that goes back. His place should be turned into a museum, like from the Smithsonian or something.
It's like our historical legacy.
It is, because the world's going multimedia, and the world hasn't been multimedia for the folks. It was only the people in Hollywood could make film and that kind of thing. But the multimedia is now becoming characteristic of the whole planet and so forth. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was, do you feel like New York is, he was talking about her being a nomad, the lady who was killed,
Yeah.
which is just a horrible thing like that. But do you feel like New York City's your home, or do you feel the world's your home, or do you feel Berkeley, or how do you feel? Because you've had a pretty checkered and moving background.
Because I ride my bicycle around,
Yeah.
and because I appreciate exactly what you said, this place that should be a museum. Yesterday I was over on Avenue C, and you know how snowy it was.
Yeah.
And Alan was loading his Final Cut Pro, and somebody was showing me a film. They were friends from high school too, I think. And I said, you know, I think I better leave because I was worried if the temperature drops, then it ices over.
Yeah.
And on a bicycle, it's bad. Well, the temperature didn't drop, and it was just so beautiful.
It was.
Yeah.
Everything's so quiet, and you feel like you can feel the presence of those generations that came before, their hopes, their dreams. This is an area that is so inspiring.
The area
Of New York.
of New York.
I remember John Galeno, who wrote Gangs of New York at Hunter College before it got stolen. If you go around New York, I remember with him in those parts, he has such a love for it. And so, and we were looking at the Rosenberg's place, remember, on Avenue
Yeah.
A also, you know, the
Ethel?
horrible, yeah,
Yeah.
the ones that were tried as treasonous people. Turns out when you look at it, there were no secrets, you know, and you can see where they were living, and that
Yeah.
heartbreak.
Yeah, it's a shame that they cheat people out of time, and people are always struggling to get money and to pay the rent, because the greatest thing you can do is just walk around New York. Like Paula mentions, when I was trying to find the house of the Rosenbergs, and I got on the wrong street, Avenue C.
Right.
And I did run into a couple of guys who said, "Are you looking for Louie and Joe?" I said, "Who are Louie and Joe?"
Well,
They said they sell their stuff right over there.
Yeah, right,
And they were selling some sort of drug.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But anyway, so I walked over to Avenue B, and I walked into a small cafe, and there was a woman that really should be on your show.
Well,
She was a filmmaker, and she was speaking to some of her students, and she was taking a trip to India. She gave me her contact information, and she said she's one of the leading filmmakers and documentarians of India, sitting there in a small shop.
Yeah.
And then there were two other women there who claimed, who said they developed Final Cut Pro.
wow.
Right.
And they would help me on my Final Cut Pro. And I
Small
still
world, huh?
have
Yeah.
to still get together with them.
Yeah.
And the heck if I remember that cafe. I think it was on the corner of 8th Street and Avenue B.
It's an amazing town, New York City. It
Yeah.
really is. But then, that kind of thing. And all that. So anyway, he's going to be talking to us, and I know you're really interested in this thing, the THC.
Well, the
that stands for tetrahydrocannabinol,
Right.
which is the active ingredient in what they call marijuana.
Right.
And they have the hemp plant and everything. But it also apparently the hemp plant has incredible curative possibilities for all kinds of things, including
There's like 7.
cancer.
Yes.
Now you've been researching that and talking about
the
it.
cancer part has to do with the University of Virginia studies in '74. And then Rick Simpson sort of accidentally
Canada.
discovered it in Canada, that you need high concentration. So you need to take, say, his formula was to take a pound of dried bud that has the, you know, that it looks like frost on the plant.
Yeah.
And you make it, after it's dry, then you put it in solvent, maybe a gallon of solvent. You smash it up and swish it around, take out the fiber, and then burn off the solvent, and you're left with something like 60 grams. And you have to take small, small amounts of it over a period of 3 months.
Take by
You eat
well,
it. You eat it. And
That's an oil.
it's
like
an oil,
Uh-huh.
and if you are acclimated to it, if you're a smoker, you can take it quicker. Now, if you're really at death's door, you need to ingest this quickly, and you might run into what they call a body stone, where you can't lift your head from the pillow. Stone.
Oh, stone.
But
like
it
in
doesn't
the-
seem to be like a high. It's just, it's like medicine. It's like making you sleep because you need to heal.
Yeah.
But the idea is if you want to go slower and if you have the leisure to go slower and you don't want to have this body stone experience and you have to go about your daily activity, because it's not affecting you mentally like smoking, then you do it over 3 months. But you have to get that amount of oil in you to go through and flush out the cancer. You need to saturate yourself.
All right, wait a minute.
That's for
wait,
cancer.
Wait a minute.
But there's other
What
things.
you're saying, no, but there is.
I know.
But the idea that, because I remember you sending me an email saying we're interested in all kinds of politics and things and news reporting and everything. Oh, and the thing they overlook is we have found a cure for cancer. And there's a guy in Italy that had to do with fungus and that.
Right.
And you really do feel that from the research with him, because that's such a big thing.
The guy in Italy is not talking about cannabis. The guy, Simoncini in Italy, is talking about how we don't have the correct paradigm running. So
That's,
that research,
I would agree with
so
economically for sure.
well, economically, possibly, but he wasn't addressing that. He was
Yeah.
just saying, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
the genetic theory doesn't make any sense, and he goes into why that's not satisfactory. And he says that basically we have, philosophically we're off. And
Yeah.
he goes since about the 1400s, when they divided the mind from the body. He says that we have a whole range. The human being goes from soul to the most reductionist aspect of organs that are placed in different places. So if you look at the body as only body parts, then if something wears out, you just cut it out and replace it. But you're not looking at what made it wear out. What are the energetic aspects? So he said that a doctor should range all the way from, in the past, what's been a priest to a neurologist to a psychotherapist, all the way down to a physiologist. And in other words, your old family doctor might know if you're kind of burdened by some kind of, something's weighing on you heavily.
Biggest burden probably in total in terms of human society has to do with economics.
Well,
That's the
I'm saying,
biggest
I'm
source of
saying,
burden.
So say a father's about ready to die and he's wondering if his children are going to be okay.
Okay.
That weighs on him.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe he cheated in some business deal and he's afraid some of his creditors are going to come after him and hit the kids. Maybe that's weighing on him. Maybe he has some secret to say. So in the past, when they would say, you have so much time to live, get your affairs in order,
Yeah.
that's a kind thing to say because it allows the transition to be smoother, and you can. There's more harmony in the family,
Well,
and
that's
there's
to
peace.
be-
So the lady that I saw,
Yeah.
she wasn't into cancer cures.
Mhm.
She had discovered 18 years ago, which is verified also by this patent in 2003. I don't know, Willie, in the control room, you might want to. I have that.
I don't
up
know
on
which
the
one was
Apple.
robotic. Is this
But
one?
you might fade that over. But this patent is actually talking about the anti-inflammatory effects of other parts of the plant that's not THC that would address epilepsy. And she had grand mal seizures. And she said she was retreating from society because she didn't want to be grabbed up in the 70s. That's what they were doing, putting people in institutions.
Yeah.
And she says it's embarrassing, you know, you're going to fall in your soup.
Of course,
and
yeah.
you have a seizure. And so she did all kinds of things and then finally found that what addressed her problem the best was marijuana. And now in her case, I'm almost confident it was smoking it. But she explained the effect on the level of consciousness, that when you're sick, first of all, you can't work. Then your economic situation is lessened. You can't buy a wheelchair. You can't go to the beach. You can't have... But by having the effect of consciousness shifted, the attitude shifted, and you're not feeling like a victim, it seems as though that starts a repair process, and then the body would come along.
Well, that's like being comprehensive or
Yeah, the consciousness...
comprehensive rather
the
than
consciousness-
specialized.
The
yeah.
consciousness is important, and at this point, I was very, very moved by a presentation that she made at Patients Out of Time, which is a group that is talking about medical marijuana. And she said, she works with people who are dying, and how marijuana got legalized in California had to do with the Compassionate Use Act, because they felt it was just too cruel when people were suffering so much at the end of their life. Their caregivers and their family close to them would risk becoming criminals and go out and get an illegal
Yeah.
substance just to alleviate it.
Alleviate a lot of
So-
the painful experience of the treatments they were given, radiation and so
Yes,
forth.
it would
would create nausea and all kinds
Right.
of things itself,
Right.
and this helped relieve
This
it,
definitely-
among other things.
This
yeah.
definitely helped that.
So that's the
but,
thing.
But that's not Rick Simpson's discovery.
No,
and
Rick
that's
Sim-
not what they were doing. But I want to say I was so pleased when I went down there and listened to her story. And she knew where I was coming from, you know. I mean, she scrutinized me before. She looked at my hokey website. And usually I feel like if the Henry George School looks at it or Robert Schachenbach, you know, I'm discounted because it's so homemade. But
No,
when
it
she
was-
saw
yeah.
it, when she saw it, she goes, here's a real person. Manhattan Neighborhood Network, she's doing public access. She liked the YouTube, so she said, come on down, because a lot of people want to get their great marijuana because it's grown with love. But she had a still there, and they are going to work with one patient who has glial tumors to see if rendering the oil, like Rick is talking about, except not blowing it off into the air where it can combust and cause a lot of damage, but she got a $500 still. So if they make the oil, that's going to be, I feel there's a paradigm that's shifting. It's moving from just alleviating pain into actually addressing cure. But I also think even if it's addressing cure, a lot of people have said cancer is the best thing that ever happened to them because they start to pay attention to their life more and cherish it more. And that's what she seemed, Valerie Corral, that's
You
what
got a lot of things wrapped up in there, and
Yeah.
that the thing you're talking about. If you have a comprehensive overview of things, and you see pattern recognition between parts of a comprehensive pattern, that's very different because the people and the peer review system we have set up and everything is set up to reify, that is to reestablish the institutions that exist, and it's all based upon highly encouraging specialization as what we call expertise. So anybody who wants to try and see a relationship between this thing and this thing is thought of as an amateur, not worthy of consideration because somebody spent 20 years investigating all the details of a particular view rather than a
Well,
comprehensive view. And the comprehensive view is inherent in the human process, and it should be encouraged rather than discouraged. They should have a department of everything at
No,
a university
there's no-
rather than breaking it all down into disciplines.
There's no question, and you're going to love Simoncini. I hope someday we can bring him to New York.
And we're
Because it is-
retrogressing. We're retrogressing because in colonial America, we always used hemp. And I remember 25 years ago, a woman approached me and she said, "You love to sell books. How about selling a book called The Great Book of Cannabis?" Which was a
Yes.
big colored encyclopedia of everything involving cannabis
Known at that
in
time.
history.
Seems to be there's new things.
and beautifully.
There's
and
definitely new
Yeah,
things. They're
yeah, but
saying
go ahead.
this-
Let the man
yeah.
go. Yeah,
It's
go
a
ahead.
beautiful book.
Yeah.
And
You
then-
have many beautiful books,
Yeah,
and you appreciate them, yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so
well,
we're retrogressing. But
I think-
another
I
thing
think we
occurred
are,
to
yeah.
me.
Well, I don't know, yeah, maybe.
We're also, because when I speak to the doctors at Columbia Presbyterian that I'm friendly with, I realize that one of the problems is not only are they ignorant, but they're also, a lot of their opinions are derived from the street people who usually fool around with these substances.
Yeah, they smoke it.
Yeah, but they sometimes change it, change the
Oh, yeah.
chemical
Oh, wow.
composition of it and so on.
Well, maybe we could address that in that, because why is there, and I'm really appreciating, because you've had a lot of programming about that there are cures that have been able to be shown, and I presume those cures and everything aren't just anecdotal or you know, but there are follow-ups to the validity of the fact that treatment with with cannabis.
They
let's
are-
say.
they
But
are-
the-
they
but
are anecdotal.
Why they are anecdotal?
They are
but that they have
Because it's under the Department of Substance Abuse.
Well, okay,
They
I
won't
think
make any
you're-
money available
You're
for it
getting
to
you're
do any
getting
other-
to the point that I'm trying to make then.
Yeah.
That if there are these wondrous things where they've actually cured cancer and they cure other things by utilizing with a chemical treatment or understanding of this thing, why would not the established medical society or the society in general have discovered that and researched it and developed products, if only from a very, crass notion of they would be able to develop something, a chemical, that they would realize a great profit from. Why would they not do that? Being educated people and interested in things, why would they not have done this, developed these things, and have it be done only by people who are in backyard places with stills?
Because they're making more money what they're doing now.
They're making more money by allowing the cancer to kill people?
Consider Marinol. Well, forget the cancer killing people because it's true.
But you say they have a cure for cancer that can be shown from some of the research. Is that true or not? Or is that just a rumor, or is that bullshit?
Well, you could have seen in the studies from 1974, if THC is going after cancer exclusively, why were there no more studies done after that?
Why weren't there? That's what I'm saying. Why wouldn't they have followed that line of investigation?
Because now you have the synthetic THC, which you can sell. A person that's taking that is paying on the average of $800 to $1,600 a month. If they can grow a plant in their backyard and smoke it, because in this case it's for the smoking, for the pain relief that they're taking it, and sometimes for appetite stimulation, but it doesn't work as well as the plant or eating the plant, the people, but they want to be legal. So you're allowed to do it if you take Marinol, but you're not allowed to have a plant.
Okay, then what you're
now look at, as far as not allowed to have the plant, I don't know, Willie, if you can put up that patent again from Apple.
Cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, or something.
Well, those are the two.
Marijuana.
Those are the two strains Rick talks about, but in the case of the U.S. patent, it's cannabinoids, it's antioxidants, and neuroprotectants. And the inventors are three. One is Adam Hampton, one is Julius Axelrod, and one is Maurizio Grimaldi.
Inventors of what?
These are the scientists. One of them is a Nobel Prize winner.
Okay.
Why did they give this patent away?
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't get it straight. What patent?
This is a patent in 2003 that was taken out by three scientists, three inventors, and it cites a lot of the research going back to '64 with Michelom. You know, you begin to see the names reappearing again and again. The Merck Index, the pharmaceutical companies themselves were involved with these studies.
Okay, why
but the question is, why did they give it away?
No, but I don't understand.
I don't know the answer yet. I'm suspecting they're thinking we are in such a crisis that somebody has to start acting without financial interests at the basis of his action.
Yeah, well,
that's my guess.
The financial
because the
interest
chemistry is here. You know, you see.
The
I want to learn chemistry.
The financial interest is probably the most single significant component of creating the society in which we live in all the world. The most important thing is that, and everything is seen through that prism.
Oh,
so
yeah,
and the economics are out of sense with what's needed. But what I'm getting at is, why would they
I think there's such a crisis. I think the ground has been plowed now to bring Norman Kurland and Robert Ashford and
binary economics and Henry George and
well,
some alternative.
If Henry George, if that board will step up to the plate, Robert Schachenbach, you know, they said that they'll tell you within a week whether they accept your proposal, you know, to go farther. I gave him 3 passes, no response at all.
So now, Schachenbach is the publisher of the material about the Henry George
and I'm
view
very
of economic
grateful.
theory.
I'm very grateful that for $10 I can get a beautiful copy of Progress and Poverty.
Okay.
But I think we can do better.
You
than
spent
that,
a whole many months reading that very carefully and very committed to the poetry of his vision.
And thanks to Henry George, when I sat with Valerie Corral, who's very open-minded, she said, "Look, I've sat at the deathbed of 100 people, and all I know is that there is more to know. This is what I know today, and I can't be judging." And so she felt that there's too many people, and I said, "Well, you know,
too many people
on the planet,
in the world,
and that this is the way." And I said, "Look, I agree we need to have balance, but I really don't believe that there's too many people." And she said, "That's fine." And this was the nature of our conversation: is that we're coming from different perspectives. And I think this is the exciting thing about Manhattan Neighborhood Network, is that we're allowed on our shows to have different perspectives. I would like to see more like YouTube, where you get interaction from the audience. I would love to give courses here, or some, you know, classes on taking call-ins, you know, working with Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. So if you get abusive calls, you don't become discouraged and stop hearing from people. But I think I think we can do something amazing. Just calm
Do you
people.
think, I was talking with some fellows here today, do you think, and we did a program with, who's the famous guy, the famous polymath, it'll come to me in a minute. But he said we live in the most incredible moment in the evolution of consciousness in this universe. There may be parallel universes, string theory tells us. But that this generation, after 200,000 years of our existence as a species, is at the most crucial generation in the history of mankind. Because our extended consciousness in the form of technology and tools has reached an existential significant moment on two ways. One is the weapons, which have always led the research for the political leaders of various systems. Empires have reached a point where apparently from modeling they've become now, along about the year 1970, species lethal. Is that possibly the case? That is, that if there was an unleashing of the weapons and a spasm of hatred, all too characteristic of the human society, it would mean now the end of our species. It would have to mean the unleashing of the weapon systems of the United States of America. But that the potentiality is there now, which has not the case as recently as the Second World War. That's one part of it. The other part is, technologically, it's going exponential now. The technological capability of providing life support for everybody to where, and if you could argue through time, there were more haves and have-nots, get a definition of term, through time. Bucky Fuller looked at it, he said we got to 10% by the First World War, 20 at the level of capability, not the reality. I inherited out of history. It got to about 20% in the Second World War. We got to a point in 1952 where we projected population trends and new materials and technology and so forth. And he said that it was going to be hyperbolic and we would cross the 50% mark around 20 years out from 1952. He said we'd cross that line about 1970. These two existentially significant new moments in the evolution of consciousness or events on this planet, we live in that time. And do you think that's the case? And this, it's crazy.
Well, you and I have always disagreed on
the
this point,
fellow,
actually.
who was the fellow, the famous guy we just did? He was the polymath that wrote, we did it with Marilyn Mock-Boasevich. She was on the...
just recently?
Yeah, but we did
again?
the program. But who's
You
the
got
famous
Marilyn back again?
Asimov.
Asimov, that's right.
Asimov.
He
I
was,
want Marilyn
he
back.
said that this is the most incredible moment ever in the history because things are going to be figured 1,000 years from now, probably from about the year 1970. And that this generation that we live in is the most crucial one that's going to be setting everything because we're either going to join entropy, go into chaos, blow it all up, or we're going to come into a liberated new order of post-scarcity or non-zero sum reality at the level of capability. All our institutions are formulated within a condition of zero sum. If I win, you have to lose. Politics, all that sort of thing. We're transcending material scarcity, and that we're coming into a liberated order rather than one in which you have some people having all the political power and controlling everybody, more like slaves as serfs on a feudal estate has been the history of most people on this planet, and that we live in that kind of a time because then you get to a pattern recognition. That's a big pattern. And then you get to a thing where these other aspects of that are there. And so no wonder you got people just questioning everything is dysfunctional. So our economic theories, our notions of human nature, everything is transformed. Or do you think we live in that kind of a time now, this and the emerging generation?
Well, this is the kind of thing that they like to articulate. The power structure likes to articulate that. But they really know the score. The ones that don't know the score is what we radicals refer to as the working class. But to get these people to put on uniforms and train to kill the other side, they have to come out with that so-called bullshit to get them to
patriotism and all
to fight the other side. But meanwhile, the ones in charge know what's going on, and believe me, they do not have any intention whatsoever to pull the plug. It's much, much easier for them to deny people knowledge of something like medical marijuana and let maybe even millions of common people die.
No question about it.
Yeah, well,
Then-
that's the thing.
No
Yeah.
question about it.
But they want
They're
to
going to
preserve.
reify outdated
But let me tell
institutions
you
like
what-
an Ancien regime.
But let me tell you what Valerie Corral told me. It's a wonderful interview. She said they're all going to die too.
Well, in the end,
she's
we're all dead, yeah.
She's focusing on this moment, you know, and it's a very interesting discussion because she said corporations will continue. The people in the offices, maybe they have big diamonds and big cars and stuff, but they're still going to die. So in that respect, we're all one. And so I learned a lot from this person.
You mean this work about, you're talking now about the medical
She's
use of
talking about
marijuana?
consciousness.
Consciousness,
She's talking
okay.
about how it affects
Yeah,
consciousness.
well, that would be, yeah.
And so she's not, you know, saying the bad guys and the corporation. She goes, this is how I worked it out for myself. And they have weathered through raid after raid after raid. And they've now gotten the Obama regime to come up with some statement. They were doing something, some kind of a compromise with their lawsuit. And she said she would have liked to have taken it all the way, but she said, what are the chances with the way the Supreme Court's stacked that it's going to actually prevail, the logic, the science, and so on. So she felt the most responsible thing to do for all of the patients that are depending on this medicine was to do the compromise. But each...
What was the compromise? To do it on the side?
First of
or?
all, they're really careful before you come down there that you do not expect that you're going to get any marijuana there. It is not about pot. It's about this consciousness thing I'm talking about. And like say
well,
with,
the curative
with Rick Simpson up in Canada after he was raided, one of the narcs came after and said, can you give me some oil? My dad's got cancer.
Yeah, right.
And Rick goes, you know, how can you work at this? You know, you deprived me of the medicine I needed, and people are going to die now. And now you're asking for your dad. Sure, here's what I have for your father. But
then he busted him, didn't he?
Well, no, he didn't bust
No,
him.
he didn't. No, I'm
they,
making
they
a-
already busted him.
Yeah, right.
So he came back afterwards. But the point is that that's why binary is so important. The more I study...
Binary economics?
Yeah,
or
binary
economics?
economics.
Yeah, okay.
Binary economics, because you've got to come up with an economic alternative. You can't be blaming these people for doing their job, because like you say, you're getting them to put on a uniform, you're getting the thinking to say, this is bad, and then as they interact on a human level, they go, my God, this helps epilepsy, you know, my cousin has epilepsy, and let me learn about this. And so you're having a little institution of learning growing up. Anecdotal. What's the matter with anecdotal?
Okay, no.
Anecdotal, we get the backside, the bad side, which is every single person we know who's gone through chemo and radiation. It's a ravishing therapy. You had preventative chemo. They didn't tell you preventative chemo would affect your teeth. You know,
Yeah,
this was knowledge that was withheld from you.
It used to be.
But I think, Harold, just in
you're right.
conclusion,
Yeah.
as public access producers, I think the best thing we can do is just create an appetite in our viewers
For
to
learning?
learn.
Yeah.
Just learn.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we know now, but tomorrow we'll know more.
And have
You go get the books. You try to weather through those websites because they're closing them down. They're changing the search engines.
Why would people be wanting to close down the mind? Why would they want people to be ignorant? What would be the reasons behind it?
Ultimately.
And also the question is, isn't it possible that they who are responsible for the institutional structures and have a leadership role because of those and are instantiated within that system where they have great advantage and power and so on, would want to shore up those institutions and the assumptions that put them in that position? But is there a possibility to where there could be an alteration that would be so comprehensively appropriate, if you're right, if you have a cure and you have a beneficial thing, or let's say an improvement of the whole human
It's also
condition
illegal. It's illegal to say you have a cure.
Wait a
also.
minute. Okay. No, but if they have that, And then you have a thing that you would have to be presenting something, and economics is behind everything. Economic theory is out of date with what's needed and everything. But there'd be a system that could be so comprehensively appropriate as, let's just use the word loosely, liberating of the human society within an ecological context, okay? That might lead to a synergistic new relationship in universe and also and everything, but that it could be inclusive of the people responsible for the outdated institutions as a lagging indicator, anchoring it to history, so that there would be no enemy other than let's find collectively the way in which we have to alter things in a way that can be inclusive of everybody. And that's the challenge. And people, it's just ignorance of a way to do that. They need vision, even our leaders. They need vision of an alteration, and it might come out of places like the things you're doing.
That's why she said, even these leaders, even the bad guys, they're going to die. So,
of course,
so we're all connected in this way.
That's right.
If we're not running away from it, you know, my hairdresser just died.
Did he?
And, yeah.
Oh, he's such a nice guy.
He was a nice guy.
I'm really sorry
But
to
I
hear that.
had to be the one to tell him, your doctors are lying to you.
Yeah.
He wouldn't believe it.
He had a cancer, was it? Or was
he had a number of problems.
Okay.
And I also went with him and saw them with ozone therapy being alleviated. But he couldn't see it. That's when I realized Jane Goldberg's work is so important.
Okay.
The psychoanalytic component is crucial, because when you're going to liberate people or take them out of slavery, including yourself, it's here that you're locked up. It's in your head. First, you have to envision and imagine.
Individually? You think it can be done? There's such a thing as individual liberation?
I don't think, well...
I don't think there is, really, except in a small scale thing. It's not bodhisattva.
But then in that case, you're just going to sit and wait, too, because that's why Valerie said this is not about marijuana. So it's not about a cure, that we're being denied a cure. It's about doing the best you can in this moment to be as faithful as you can to the truth. Like, for example, it's illegal to say cancer has a cure. I take a certain risk. I've decided this is a risk I'll take. Somebody approaches me through YouTube and says, I have some great pot, you know, and I'll get it to you at a good price. I chose not to take that type of risk. Dealing involves a lot of money. It would be nice to be able to
have a lot of money.
To not be so stressed out over the things I'm stressed out over. But I'm decided that that's not a risk I want to take, because I feel it'll jeopardize other things I'm trying to do, and I weigh it, and I'm feeling, if I can, it's true, it's frustrating that I have to tell my viewers there's a wonderful solution, but it's illegal.
No, there seems to be.
I haven't finished the process if I haven't made that available, but now I made my little studio available while I was gone through Mali. Jerry Jacobs called up, and he's running for mayor. He was running for mayor of New Orleans on a decriminalized marijuana ticket, which is very profound. He thought it through very carefully. He said, the money that was earmarked for Katrina is not going to New Orleans. And if you approach FEMA, they'll say it's too much time has passed. But if you try to get it for another disaster, they'll say it's earmarked for New Orleans.
Paula, what role is this old friend of mine, Paul Krasner, playing? You know, he's about 78 now, and by the way, when he's the youngest child prodigy ever to Concertize.
Paul Krasner.
Paul Krasner.
Paul Krasner is the one who gave me Valerie's number. He gave me a lot of them.
Oh, wow.
I called him
Is that the Paul Krasner?
The Paul Krasner.
Of the realist?
I was
Great guy.
I was on
Funny
the,
beyond belief. Friend of mine.
Yes,
A good acquaintance of mine,
I was on the I hesitated calling him. You know, Carl Pearson's wife told me about him, and my contact said, well, have you called him? Have you called him? And I said, well, you know, he seems a little decadent. He goes, decadent? So I said, look, I have conferencing, so let me have you on the line and we'll call him together. And we called him together, and I was able to tell him all that I had learned, and he was listening very carefully. I said, look, the marijuana activist groups are not talking about the most exciting parts. They're not talking about the patent of 2003. And so then he gave me 8 emails, and I took a couple days to kind of figure out how do I approach this. And Valerie was the one that responded. So the 7 others haven't, including Steve Hagar of High Times. He hasn't responded.
Well, why did you ask the question?
Well, because Paula mentioned to me that she had seen Paul cross in California.
I didn't see him. I just
Paul Krasner.
Krasner. He's in Desert Hot Springs, and I was in Berkeley, California,
wow.
up in the north.
Oh.
I'd like to see him though.
He was my lifeline in 1967. That realist was the best thing going, man. It was
Yeah.
really good. He was really
a
smart and
violinist. You know, he was a violinist.
Maybe we're talking about different crowds.
No,
No,
you're talking about the
it's
same
the
one.
same
Do you know,
one.
you know
I didn't
why?
know he was a
Do you know
violinist.
do you know how he got into the funny stuff? He was a child prodigy playing at Carnegie Hall, and he said his leg itched, but he didn't want to stop playing, so he took his one leg around to itch it, to scratch it. And he said the room started laughing, and he said his childhood had been so deprived of that balance by studying and practicing that when he heard the laughter, it burst something open in his heart, and he said that was the direction that he wanted to go.
Yeah, but the question is, why would the society, the established society, not, they're going to be reifying institutions, but how do we deal with the dilemma of people who want to be not allowing new things to come because they're paranoid? Maybe they don't have a vision of how we're going to, when you say we have to have an economic reorganization from the principles, we're coming out of a big recession now. 8.5 million jobs lost. Mr. Keynes said there's not going to be, we're going to have massive displacement of labor in the economic process through technology. About the time of the grandchildren now, 1930 he wrote it. They're talking about a jobless recovery. The only way they have to distribute demand to people is through having a job. Job is pronounced or spelled the same as Job. I mean, it's a job, and they're going to and it's the only way to distribute income to the masses of the people, and it's outdated with what the future requires. That's a major thing that would have them upset. I mean, they're up against a thing where you're coming into a need for a comprehensive, not a pot here or this here or that there or that there, and it's not a problem there or here or there. It's a pattern of all of them, a giant pattern that we have to address, and nobody's addressing it at a comprehensive level that would be so comprehensive as to be able to include the bad guys. As well as all the people who only can harp at the bad guys without coming up with a comprehensive, inclusive idea and way of having a transformation of the whole system.
You're right, because comprehensively there are no good guys or bad guys.
Right.
It's just ignorance.
Well, yeah, ignorance is maybe the collective one. And we just have to have, but that's why I'm saying.
But it's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. I told Molly, I said, what I really want to do is teach chemistry. But the problem is, I need to learn it. I don't know chemistry.
To learn and to learn any.
I want to understand.
Do you realize, young lady?
Do you realize,
young lady, that you could spend 5 lifetimes learning chemistry, and 5.5 lifetimes learning physics, and 5.5 times in learning the use of the pluperfect tense in 13th century poetry in France, and all the specializations, and it's divide and conquer. Fuller was comprehensive, and he said that the people who run the world and want to, it's like an Ancient regime. They want to keep control. They deliberately funded graduate schools to divide and conquer the intellectual bright ones coming up who would be a threat.
Right.
And so that's part of the context in which we live, and it's life and death at a species pattern recognition now. And it was not that case for anybody in history, and no matter what happens, it won't be a possibility or the case for anybody henceforth from this day of February 11, 2010 of the Christian era.
See, that's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I'm saying. Jane Goldberg's psychoanalysis, you unlock your awareness. You know,
well, that's part of psychoanalysts, and you got Rollo May, and you got other people with psychiatry and understanding consciousness. Freud fits into a pattern, and that's there, and then that links to economics, and everything is linked to everything else. So you don't want to go in depth into anything.
Providing people aren't lying. You know, when they start to manipulate the truth, and then you're thinking that you're getting the truth, and it's not.
Well, they would manipulate the truth. We just did a program yesterday
with... Just a subtle manipulation. Like Freud had a perfectly good word for soul, and they called it mind. By calling soul mind, they put it under a medical rubric, so now Sigmund Freud is sort of psychiatrist to it. But really, in truth, he had envisioned people in the humanities. It's just a matter of paying attention to the signals in the unconscious that we have. It's a dual drive. We have ways that we're loving and uniting, and we have ways that we're destructive and aggressive. We have both those ways.
Well, they're there.
So to only emphasize one is to only have 50% of what life is. So
Don't emphasize one, emphasize both. But what you're and the
but
thing
you have
is-
to be familiar with it. Like, so if a doctor says, get
but they
your
won't
affairs
give you
in order,
credence.
you're
They-
dying.
yeah, but they won't give you credence if you're talking about something like medical marijuana because you don't know all the details that is going to make it so that what you're saying is
so you-
wrong
so you-
because you're relating that information to something
Yes.
else.
So you-
comprehensive. And the enemy is anybody who thinks comprehensively about things, which the people who run the world tend to do.
But have you
And they
ever-
want to divide and
But
conquer
have
the
you ever-
intellectual process.
But have you ever
through
done-
graduate school?
Have you ever, with self-analysis or meditation, watched yourself doing it?
I got a lot of that
When
because I
you
see a
watch
lot of video
yourself-
feedback on myself. Unfortunately, I got 27 hours of programs, and I don't think I like what I see all the time.
Well, but
Mostly I do.
you see, what the idea of group analysis is that you have therapeutic allies, so that if you're not catching it, someone else can, and you're in a group and you've made a commitment, and it's a process that's constructive.
Well, I don't know.
It's amazing.
Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis. Seth Farber, I'm happy to announce, I think, has a publisher for his book. He
Okay.
was into Thomas Szasz, and Thomas Szasz wrote The Myth of Mental Illness, that there is no mental illness and that kind of thing. It was a renegade, along with the other fellow out of England and everything. But he calls it, and he's singing the praises. He's singing the praises in the book. You know how we had a feminist thing? So ladies are strong, and I'm strong, I'm invincible. And then black people, and then
Right.
Indian people, and all the different people who've been oppressed in various ways and everything like that. But he's singing the praises of mad pride.
Right.
Mad pride. The people
Right.
who are crazy. The
Who are
people who are
called
thought of
crazy.
as crazy should be incorporated in this because it's from them that a lot of the really important ideas are coming forth. And sanity is associated with a rational way of running down everything. And our institution, that's the major problem confronting us. We
think-
don't have pattern recognition.
I think yes and
Our
no.
computers do. They may get ahead of us.
Can we get any of this treatment anywhere in the world
Yeah,
Well,
where can
without
you get the
being
treatment for the cancer? Somebody's got
prosecuted
cancer and they're going to die,
and
and they
harangued?
can't use it, or what's the story?
And
In California, you can get a prescription for medical marijuana, and I think what's happening is, though, there's a federal state thing going on right now, and as soon as Obama was elected, they had a raid, so there was like a shot saying, hey, don't think anything's going to change here. So it seems what's happening is the rich people are getting the information, everybody's growing it,
Yeah.
and when they bust the dispensaries, unfortunately, it's the poor people who suffer.
Always.
So we've got to create an appetite in the disadvantaged for knowledge so that they understand it. And after understanding, you can see where you want to go. 800,000 people went to jail for marijuana last year.
That's filling the
Most
prisons.
of it was for private use. These weren't dealers.
Yeah, I know. It's
800,000 people.
two
So
and a half
you
million
can't- you
people in
can't-
prison. I think it's a big growth industry.
But that's what you do. You go out.
And it's all based on the war
Yeah.
on drugs.
Yeah.
And it's like a perversion.
But
of time.
like Valerie said, it's not about marijuana. It's about what your question was. Your question would be for yourself, for your viewers, for the people you care about. Everyone has to kind of figure their place. I am being bold to say there's a cure. I'm looking at this stuff.
When you say
there's
a cure, there's
Now-
a cure. You've said in a note to me. There's a cure for cancer.
Yes.
Okay, and you're talking
Yes.
it's a fungus,
And
you
so
got
I
this.
take that risk. I'm not buying and selling marijuana, but I take the risk. I've decided this is where I feel comfortable to take the heat for that. If someone was saying, yo, you're going to jail. So what I did was I created a wallpaper on my YouTube site of this patent,
Okay, good.
Although
That's
this,
very good.
although
You
this
brought
patent
that
is
up.
not about
And why would they give it
this
away?
patent is
No.
not about cancer.
Now,
but-
my question is, why would let's say you're illegitimate in the view of the peer review people who are getting all
Yeah,
kinds of funding and
I've
everything.
been chastised by Dr.
Right,
Querci. He says
right.
you're practicing medicine
Yes,
without a license.
right,
But I
right.
see my friend's skin cancer heal. I see it with my own eyes. I can't turn my back on that.
Okay, and you believe in the
so-
miracles of Jesus and that kind of stuff. So you got that. But,
I-
that's part of your
that's a
way. That's another
separate
story.
topic.
I understand.
That's a
I
big
understand,
topic,
but it's
but
part
not
of
for
a
now.
comprehensive thing. But why wouldn't there be?
Well, let's say
what
Jesus
would-
put his money where his mouth was.
Well, what
He
would-
gave evidence.
Okay.
And we could too with science. We could
But
produce
this is
the
not,
cures.
This is not science. It's not past the peer review stage. Is it been done by the American Medical Association, the major researchers in Smith Klein and all these people, why do they not, if this is care, there's anecdotal, there's this that makes sense, there's that, why would they not look at it and give it a serious consideration somewhere? Susan Mazur just showed that the peer review system is so corrupt in terms of maintaining what's there, and it's all based primarily and at base on money. And getting grants from the people who want to reify the situation.
Josh has the answer.
Give me the answer, Solomon.
Well, I'm going to go back to Karen Scream a minute.
Yeah.
They said one of her qualities was to be able to work with people who have massive egos, and that was one of her talents. And I think when you work at M&N or Pacific or any of these places, the only way you can really get by and make a really significant contribution is to be able to work with the people with massive egos and so on. And I like what Paula says.
Yeah.
There aren't really very many evil people. And the establishment does set up a step ladder for the most talented and brilliant to get their PhDs and their degrees and so on. But it also creates an elitist system where these people finally become divided from the humble roots
from the masses.
From the masses. So
And
it's really a problem.
Well, it is, and it's economic by and large, I would think.
Except, Josh, you always said people are survivors. I think you have to have confidence in the ingenuity of people, and in a way it's every man for himself. But I think looking at these scientists need champions. They need.
But why has
I like kings and queens. You don't like kings and queens. I believe some people
It's
are
just
sort
outdated, that's all.
I don't think it is. I think we need some people that are going to step up and say this isn't right, and they can take more heat. I think some people are built to take more heat. And if they don't do it, they feel bad.
Well, why isn't anyone stepping up at a level of comprehensive rather than one thing?
Trying.
One little
You're
thing.
trying.
One
Josh
part.
is trying.
Oh, but where are the
Where's
big minds?
Marilyn Fox Savant? Let's get her back on the show again, Harold. I love that show.
What show?
At the end, with you and her, she goes, I could talk to you for hours. That was the last thing that she said on that.
That's another issue. But no, it's just that
she's the smartest person in the world. We need the smartest person in the world.
Well, by IQ measurement, that's the case, which is a great brand.
And she was smart enough to say that if you evaluate in another way, I might not be. You know? So she also had humility. She was balanced. She was. I would love to see that kind of talent come back to Manhattan neighborhood.
Right. We want some way that's able to include everybody. So that would be a beginning point. You know, and the thing is, you have to have something, and at base, in terms of the real problem, at base, there's really nothing that matters, in my way of thinking, because it's so prominent in terms of the lodestar by which all our institutions are formulated as economic theory, and the way you're going to produce and utilize human knowledge to benefit or whatever, and to how you can distribute the ability for people to clear the market of what can be done. There's nothing more, and we do not have a system in place. Mr. Obama is struggling with it. They need help. The world needs help with vision of some way that relates